Morning in Washington, good afternoon in Kiev and other European capitals, and good evening in the Far East. My name is John Herbst. I run the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. We have an excellent event for you today. We will be featuring Ukrainian Energy Minister Galushchenko, who's been the Energy Minister of Ukraine since the spring of 2021. He's also a member of Ukraine's National Defense and Security Council since the spring of 2021. A career lawyer. He's taught at Ukrainian universities, law. And Minister Galushchenko will speak for 10 or so minutes. I will then ask him questions for another 20 plus, and then we will take audience questions. And you can ask questions virtually by going to askac.org. Askac.org. And Mr. Minister, it's a pleasure to see you, if only virtually, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John, for presenting me, and then it's a pleasure to be here today. And it's really, I think it was a very important topic which we could discuss during our meeting today. Because it's really 3 years of war and 3 years of our energy exist under, I might say, everyday attacks to the energy infrastructure. And the level of attacks is really huge because from 2022, we already went through more than 30 massive attacks. And when I'm talking about the massive attacks, so it means in 22-23, it was something up to 150 missiles. So, but this winter, which was really the hottest winter, even to compare the previous ones, the massive attacks, it's something around 300 missiles and drones at once. So that's only show that the Russians increase the level of attacks to the energy infrastructure. Of course, we understand that legally that is contrary to all international conventional rules, but they don't care on that point. But what we see that this winter, which was predicted to be very, very difficult, and I must say that, of course, we also face some apocalyptic predictions that we would live without electricity during the winter, that there would be no heat. And unfortunately, this was a part of Russian message also, and it was also somewhere in international media, in some messages, and some international organization also like predict this very, very difficult situation in winter. But we managed to withstood another more winter, and I can tell you that from December, after the let's say another massive attack, which was on 26th of December, we do not have any restriction to our people, first of all, to our households, in the electricity supply and heat. And we also provide electricity. We had some temporary restriction to the business, but not to people. So I might say that, I mean, generally, even with these difficulties for this winter, we really managed to withstood, and we, of course, create a number of very difficult decisions how to maintain the energy system during these attacks and after the attacks. Of course, some of these decisions are, frankly speaking, far from some technical standards, but it works, they are efficient, and we know what to do in case of these attacks, which unfortunately was very, very heavy, especially during this winter and also the previous year, because they started the attacks from March 22 last year, and during this time we lost up to 10 gigawatt of generation facilities. So we had to repair these facilities during the previous year, and the problem that if compared to 22-23, the previous year we had to do this under constant shellings and attacks to our infrastructure. But of course, even when we are talking about this 3-year war, I can tell you that we are moving ahead. Even under the shellings, even with these constant attacks, but we are doing a lot of things in the energy, which really could change and shift the situation in European markets and situation, I mean, generally. And that is the ground for our joint cooperation between Ukraine and the United States. So I am absolutely sure that the energy sphere is really a key sphere for our joint interests to be implemented, and it's very important that there is a lot of talks now. Unfortunately, even I see some articles in European media which send like messages that ceasefire or the end of the war, and we have to think how to bring Russia back to European energy market. But I am absolutely sure that that is not an interest, of course, of the Europe and Ukraine and United States to bring Russians back to European markets. And that is, for me, I feel that that is a great opportunity for our joint cooperation, that the United States business could easily substitute the Russians on the European market and become the key player in all spheres of energy. Let's start with the, for instance, first, of course, that is nuclear. And we really have a great results of cooperation during the war. So together with the Westinghouse, we create, in fact, we had before the monopoly of Rosatom on one type of 440 fuel for VVR reactors, and only Rosatom was the company who could produce this type of fuel. But we did, together with Westinghouse, we did incredible things, because in a year and a half we created a new type of fuel which is produced by Westinghouse for 440 reactors. We already loaded in Ukraine. It's already operational, and so it's really finished the monopoly of Russia on this type of fuel in Europe. And it's opened the possibility now, for instance, for Westinghouse to sell this fuel to another countries with operate the same types of reactors. And we have already these contracts. So, and I think that is a key importance of this cooperation. We also constructed a fuel storage, vested fuel storage, together with the Holtec, another US company, and that is the unique project which allowed us also not to be dependent on Russia, because before we sent the vested fuel to Russia, and of course because of the war, so it's impossible. And that we did this storage several months, we opened the storage several months before the big war started, and so that's give us possibility to operate the Westinghouse fuel and then safely save it on this storage. Another examples, of course, we have a lot of cooperation concerning the fuel assemblies. We discussed the SMR developments and SMR projects together with US companies, and we have some MOUs also concerning the construction of a P1000 Westinghouse reactors in Ukraine. So we hosted here delegation from Westinghouse, and we were in the sites where this first reactors would be constructed. We already advanced some type of equipment for that, and that is really very important, because what we see that the situation with Russia and the discussions, everything concerning the nuclear, it's very important that this would be a gate. It could be a gate to open the US technology in nuclear in Europe to substitute the Russian technology, and that is very important. I mean, for the future. Another very important, of course, cooperation could be in the gas, and that is, of course, today the United States increased the supply of gas, LNG gas to Europe, but we still see that the Russian gas is still there. So, and something around 19% is still supplied by Russia, and I think that is a huge opportunity to supply this, to substitute this Russian gas from United States, and also to cooperate in Ukraine here in increased production, because that is very important. We have very good storages of gas. We have a lot of gas which is already available for drilling, available for for production, and that is very important that we could use Ukraine as a country where you increase production, supply to Europe, because we have a very good interconnectors, and we stopped the gas transit this year with Russia, but we could use these interconnectors to supply gas to Europe, which could be produced in Ukraine, and from the other side to supply the LNG directly to Europe, and just to substitute completely the Russians on the gas market of Europe, which is, I think it's very important, because we know that they always use gas as not only the commodity, but they always use gas as a possibility to get some impact and influence to the countries, because they usually give some reduction in prices, and we know how it's connected. And we have the biggest storages, gas storages in Europe, which is more than 30 BCM of gas in Ukraine, which could be used for the security of supply to Europe. And of course, we could also discuss all other opportunities like renewables. We have a lot of also developments on that side. And one, and probably also very important point which should be mentioned, that any energy projects which should be and could be implemented in Ukraine in all spheres now, it's have a great opportunity to be the project for the whole Europe, because you know that we are connected now to European grids, and in 2022 we start exporting electricity to Europe, and that's, by the way, was one, on my view, one of the reasons why the Russians started attacking our energy infrastructure, because getting electricity from Ukraine, Europe save on Russian gas, and but that gives us an opportunity, because we are moving ahead to the European market. So now we are working on a number of legislation in different spheres. But first of all, that is market coupling. That is the legislation which allowed Ukraine to be like a complete member of European market with the European regulation. And we also see the forecast for the consumption of electricity in Europe, and we see some deficit, which is confirmed by NSOE. And I think it's very important that here is a huge opportunity also to become a huge player in European market for exporting electricity from Ukraine to Europe, and also that's a matter of energy security and security of supply. And having our experience on this operation of the system during the attacks, or all these years of different attacks, because they also change the tactics, they change the weapon, and so we have this experience how to operate in different but very difficult conditions. So I think it's also very important that using this opportunity we could understand what energy system we should build. I mean, which mix should be in the system to be more safe, to be more predicted in case of any risk, not only military risk, but any natural risk or whatever could happen. So and that is also important, because even when we are talking about renewables, so now we understand that from the military point of view, the renewables is very difficult target for the enemy, because they are spread it. So we are now implemented a number of projects in decentralized generation, and it shows that of course for the enemy it's more easy to target one huge generation capacity. But if it's spread it all around the country, even with the thousands of drones, thousands of missiles which they use to attack us, it's very, very, very difficult for them. So thanks that, I really believe that the cooperation between the United States and Ukraine is really a key issue for the security of supply for the whole Europe. And that is the point which I really want to stop on and give the floor back to you, John. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was unmuted. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for that wide discussion of any possible energy cooperation. Let me start, though, by asking about the energy ceasefire, right? The ceasefire on attacks on energy installations. We know that Putin violated that within an hour or two of giving the quote unquote command to his forces to stop shooting at energy infrastructure in Ukraine. Have the Russians continued to target energy infrastructure over the last several weeks?
Unfortunately, yes, you are right. So we had attacks just several days after this announcement of this ceasefire in the energy. The question that we do not have now the massive attacks, which I meant the massive, which we are talking about, like 300 or 200 usually missiles or drones at once. But I must say that these attacks happen especially in the cities or villages or substation which are near the battlefield, but that is intentional attacks, because what we see that is not an accidentally, that the drone is just falling on substation. So that is like intentional attacks to the after transformers, for instance, and it have immediate impact to the supply and restriction electricity for the households.
Okay, a related question, though not strictly tied to the ceasefire or the not quite holding ceasefire. Uh, what about the dangers posed by Russian military operations at or near nuclear facilities in Ukraine? Obviously, I'm thinking of the Zaporizhia reactor, but perhaps elsewhere. How does that look to you?
Thank you, John. That is a very important question, and that is really the question which we raise. And worries which we raise everywhere, especially in the board of governors of EIA. So we even adopted a number of resolutions on that issue. So what is happening now, and that is happening from August last year. So we fixed more than 100 times. I might say now it's even more than 150 times when the missiles or drones are flying over or nearby nuclear power plants. And we are talking about 3 operational nuclear power plants. This case with Chernobyl confinement drone attack. And of course, Zaporizhia, it's not operational, but it still have the nuclear material on it. So, and what we see that these attacks or these drones or missiles which are flying really create a danger for the situation. But what is more dangerous, that is the attacks of Russians, and that is intentional attacks during these massive attacks. When they attack the substations critical for nuclear, which cause the emergency shutdown of nuclear units, and that is operational nuclear units. And that is our messages which we discussed. We put it in the draft of resolutions. We asked the EIA experts to visit this substation, and we had very tough discussion in EIA board of governors. With the Russians, so they blamed that is not a statute of EIA to do this. But we said, guys, no country in the world attacks this substation critical for nuclear when you have emergency shutdown of nuclear unit, and that is only one step before the Fukushima scenario. That is only one step before the nuclear accident. And we adopted a number of resolutions which very strongly condemned this and very strongly identified this. These attacks brings the emergency shutdowns of nuclear unit, which is absolutely contrary to nuclear and radiation standards.
Thank you. You mentioned in your remarks good cooperation with Westinghouse and with Holtec, one on creating nuclear fuel, producing it, and the other on storing spent nuclear fuel. One area where even when the U.S. put serious sanctions on Russia, we did not really sanction nuclear energy industry because we were dependent on them for nuclear fuel. Do you see Ukraine being able to substitute that for providing nuclear fuel to the United States as a result of your cooperation with Westinghouse?
I think that's important also question, because that is more connected to the uranium issue and the role of Russia on Iranian market. Unfortunately, they still have the influence to the market, and that
Right.
brings the different difficulties in this issue. But I'm absolutely sure that we already have a lot of developments on that. And today, the Westinghouse supply 52% of the fuel for the European nuclear industry, and but Russia still have 30. So what is important but we see that the level of the Russia role on that decreased, and it's very important. I think that we should move on this road together. That's not only about. We have good cooperation, for instance, in uranium issue with Cameco from Canada or Urenco from UK. So we have to increase altogether production. I mean, to substitute Russia, and I think it's very important not also to give them possibility to manipulate this issue of uranium supply. Unfortunately, we have one case last year when even publicly they said that if we would stop, and of course it would have the impact. I think that we could do this together with, especially with the Westinghouse experience, which is really a very long time partner for us. And what we did? We the first country in the world which substitute the Russian type fuel on VVR reactors. So we substituted with Westinghouse fuel, and so I think that without that, I mean, if we won't do this before the full-scale invasion, it would be a disaster for us. So we can't operate the nuclear fleet in the country.
No, this is very important because there's a lot of fantasy talk right now among some influential circles near the White House about economic bonanza in U.S.-Russian economic cooperation in theory, when there's never been such a bonanza in the past. But here we have something. Russia is, in fact, an adversary of the United States. They claim us to be their principal adversary. And here's something where we could increase substantially cooperation with you, which is good for our economy and also good for our national security. Okay, on the same subject, you talked about the gas market in Europe. We know there's some fatuous talk in Germany, and for that matter, sadly, among some circles near the White House about resuming Nord Stream 2, a disastrous idea. Trump came into office saying he wanted to greatly increase American energy production. I think that's been a success of his administration so far. And it would seem to me he wants to market the energy we produce, including gas in Europe. You talked about the great storage capacity in Ukraine. Is this storage capacity that might be available for American gas being exported to Europe?
Absolutely. So they could be available because we do not need these volumes of gas for local consumption, and that is really very important because that is the figures of volumes of gas, which could be very important for Europe as a energy security issue. And of course, that's recently, by the way, I also read a number of articles in European media that there is some discussion so that we have to restart the supply of Russia gas through pipes. It's not, I mean, Nord Stream or Ukrainian pipes, but there were discussion about the volumes. Like, no, of course it won't be like 100 BCM, but probably we need 50 or 70. I think even the discussion is really very dangerous for the Europe, because everything what is connected to the supply of gas and dependence on Russia and the Nord Stream issues, that is like to increase dependence on Russian gas, is really creates a situation on 2022 when it was a total collapse with the prices on European markets due to this invasion. And you know what is also interesting, that in fact this restriction of gas supply started from November 21. So in Russian, gradually decrease supply to Europe, and the night on 23 to 24, when the full-scale invasion started, they immediately increase the volumes of gas which they supply to Europe, just giving them like a signal, look, so that is our case, but we will increase the supply of gas. I think it's very connected tools for them. I mean, the gas, and unfortunately, this story and the gas is always used as a weapon.
Sadly, yes, and we should be smart about that going forward. All right, let's see. What's your view? This goes a little bit beyond your set remarks, but I know you have thoughts on this, and Ukraine has thoughts on this. How do you evaluate the existing U.S. sanctions regime on Russia as related to energy?
Um, it's good that we have the sanctions, and of course, we always. I'm joking that we always want more, and that it's not only about the U.S. sanctions. That is also about the European sanctions. And I remember when there were discussions on the cap for oil, and that's of course that is one of the main sources now of receiving profits. But even with the sanctions, what happened? And that, for instance, even with the sanctions, Europe spent something around 22 billion of euros to pay Russia for the fossil fuels last year. So it shows that we need to push more. We need to increase the sanctions, because in fact that is probably the only way for Russia to, let's say, to spend the money for the war.
Thank you. A reminder to our audience, if you have questions, go to askac.org, and I'll start taking audience questions in about 5 minutes. All right, Mr. Minister, next item. The Ukraine National Energy and Climate Plan, which was approved in 2024, aims to coordinate environmental, energy, and economic policies for Ukraine's sustainable development. Could you detail the goals and actionables from this plan, as well as progress made toward the 2030 target of 27% renewables?
Um, yes, we adopted this plan, and it also takes the let's say situation on the land, because what I mentioned, that we see that renewables, it's really a very difficult target, even from the point of view of military risks. And we already did a lot of that. Is like corporate PPA. We already create the guarantees of the origin system for RES electricity and renewable actions. A lot of this happened, and I think it's very real figures which we could achieve even in the situation of war. So we do not predict when the war would be over, but we understand that we need to move this way. And I can tell you that even a lot of programs last year we started with the business, with the houses, with private people. I mean, to install the renewables, to install the solar panels. Wind is very popular now. I mean, there's a lot of projects. So we have a special programs for the banks, so you could get the zero interest loan to install the renewable. So it's really now have a huge interest in the in our society, I might say, as to the business, as for the business or for the private people. And I think that is very important to reach these figures you mentioned, which is absolutely right. That's up to 27%.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll start with questions from the audience because we've got a bunch here. Uh, First is from Barbara Blake. What is the role of China, if any, in the Ukrainian energy market? Has there been interest from the Chinese in investing in infrastructure or in the purchase of LNG?
In fact, we had some China companies in solar panel production, but it was long before even the war started in 2014. But generally, there was some discussion, proposition from China on nuclear, but we do not have any projects now which is implemented on the field.
Okay, thank you. Question is from Leaf Brown. Where does the equipment for Ukrainian power plants and gas facilities come from? Are they produced in Ukraine? Or are they coming from other countries? And
Sorry.
please,
Yeah,
no,
sorry.
go ahead. Then there's a follow-up question. I'll ask that next.
Okay. So partially it's produced in Ukraine. So we have a lot of production which could produce the energy equipment, but also a lot of equipment we buy and receive from all over the world, from many countries.
Okay. Do you believe this will be impacted by tariffs, which have become, of course, a very important issue lately?
I don't feel that in the case of this equipment, it would be a problem.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Michael Gamboa asking about the current energy relationship between Ukraine and Moldova.
I can tell you that we have very good relations now. And first of all, in 2022, 21 days after the full-scale invasion started, when we become a part of energy market that were connected to European grids, we did it together with Moldova. And now we are in one group with Moldova. And so we really we have a lot of cooperation. Also, for instance, in gas issue and electricity, Ukraine is exporting now electricity to Moldova. And we, especially when the situation happened with this Transnistria this January, we also discussed a number of projects and how to increase Ukrainian export to Moldova, how we could provide the coal for the necessary reasons. So that's why I can tell you that I must say that we are in constant contact, and we are planning also all these reforms to move ahead the European Union, to move ahead the European market in the energy together with Moldova.
Thank you. Let's see. Here's a question from Derek Bartlett. President Trump has commented on the possible U.S.-Ukraine joint ownership of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Is this in Ukraine's interest?
You know, I think that's the very important point concerning the Zaporizhzhia. We can't leave this situation as it is. So if we would allow Russians to leave the Zaporizhzhia and to operate or not operate, or even to leave the Zaporizhzhia NPP under their legal control, that is a disaster for everything what world achieve in the peace nuclear in the world. Because I mean, it's impossible then to invest in nuclear. And now we are talking about the renaissance of nuclear industry in the world. So no one would allow you to invest in nuclear if one country could just get the nuclear, the biggest in Europe nuclear power station, and occupy it and control it after the war is over. So I think it's very important point. And of course, we have a joint interest with the United States to bring it under Ukrainian control, but not only to bring, but to start operation of this nuclear power plant, because it could bring another possibility for cooperation between us. I mean, when we are talking about the export of electricity, for instance, or we need more electricity for any projects which would be and could be implemented in Ukraine together with the United States, because we need more electricity and for the development and reconstruction of the country. So, and that's very important.
Thank you. This question is from Kelly Bird. What role do small nuclear modular reactors play in Ukrainian energy resilience? And do you think you've gotten enough support from the West with this?
You know, of course, that is one of our targets and one of our plans to have the SMRs, and we really want to substitute the thermal generation by SMRs, and that is the best solutions. We already have a number of projects, by the way, together with the United States, with DOE on that issue. So we discuss the different options. The problem that we do not have the industrial samples of SMR still, so we have a lot of discussions with US. First of all, US company like again Holtec, Westinghouse, NewScale. So we are really wanted to be a part of this movement towards the SMR, and we understand that that is really the future. But again, the future of SMR, they are also connected to the question of nuclear safety security and the question of Zaporizhzhia NPP. So I think it's very important, because we have to show that no one could catch illegally the nuclear object, no matter whether it's big or SMR. So and to take it by force, and that is, I think, very important.
I certainly agree with that. Okay. What question now from Alexis Rinkoff? What steps is the ministry taking to support efforts for more transparency, for an even playing field for investors who want to enter or expand in the Ukrainian energy market in the reconstruction of Ukraine? Or for that matter, even today, as you still fight this war?
I think that, Ron, that's very important. I mean, not to stop and not to wait. That's what we discussed, because a lot of legislation, for instance, what we are talking today in renewables or in this integration with the EU markets, we really drafted in the bomb shelters from 2022. So and that is also some kind of history for us. I mean, it would be a kind of history that we do it in the shelters, but we don't want to stop, because I think that's the bring more this rules for transparency, for the market regulations, which could bring Ukraine closer to EU legislation. It's really the best guarantee for the country to be investment, or to bring investment to the country, to be sure that you are in the right place.
Thank you. Okay. Here's a question from someone who signs him or herself as Wojtek. What do you think the flow of capital from foreign companies will start? When do you think it will start? In other words, what is necessary for non-Ukrainian companies to do to start investing in Ukraine's energy sector? That should be a question you welcome.
A very good question, yeah, because everything is. Let's be frank. So everything is around the war. And of course, we discussed a number of solutions like the war risk insurance and the for instance, the grain corridor. So it's, I mean, we have examples, and we have, for instance, the insurance from the other countries for the business of the countries who could go to Ukraine. But even with that, of course, I see that the business is very careful, especially when we are talking about the big projects. But what is also very important, that I think that the war would be over, and if the company or the business, that's what was my message to all the business everywhere where I participate in all around the world. So I always said that if you wants to be in Ukraine, if you wants to invest, and we really have a huge opportunity. I always said that Ukrainian is really an energy hub for the Europe that is a real future for our country. So please choose the project, choose the sphere now. If you are not ready to spend money right now, use the time of the war and the martial laws as a possibility to get very quick for instance, permissions, license, everything you need for the project. So now we could do it much faster than in a peaceful time, and be ready to have the whole documentation, which in the energy sector always takes time, and be ready to invest like immediately next day after the war is over, not to waste time on preparing all necessary licenses or permissions or whatever.
I can understand why that would give firms a competitive advantage in the reconstruction period to do that. Is your sense that are you seeing any of that coming from would-be Western investors? Are people starting to do this, what you've just recommended?
It's always someone is always the first, and even with the risks, because we have a lot of, in fact, a lot of companies, new companies, when we are talking about, for instance, the military sphere. So we have a lot of productions all around the country. You could choose the best part of Ukraine if you wants to be, let's say, far from the battlefield. But I think it's very important that if you're the first, you always have the best opportunities.
Thank you. There's a question from Kate Winston, who's a reporter at S&P Global Commodity Insights. So answer this carefully. What are the opportunities for U.S.-Ukraine cooperation on oil? Oh, and perhaps even more timely, what is the status of the energy and minerals deal with the Trump administration?
The negotiation is in the progress. So I think that yesterday or the day before yesterday, our technical team just returned from DC. And it looks like we have a progress on the deal. And once again, so I absolutely sure that is in common interest of our countries. Again, we are talking about the oil or gas, that's everything is covered. But what is very important, because everything what we discussed today is connected. Because if we would have a deficit of electricity, you could never get these minerals out of the land, because you need a constant electricity for that, for production or extraction of these minerals. So so we're coming back to Zaporizhia, we're coming back to the generation facilities which we should have in Ukraine to really to make these deals more efficient on the land.
Let me come back to the negotiations. I understand you may not want to say much more, but as you know, a great controversy erupted after the Financial Times published maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago what I think was the new draft from the Trump administration after they put aside the agreement in principle, which was not signed in February. Is it safe to say that the negotiations have moved well past that draft?
I think that as I know, I am not a participant of these negotiations, but as I understand, there was some modification of this draft was discussed, and there were some agreements about that. So I don't know the details.
Okay.
Okay.
I won't press you any further. That's fine. I appreciate that. Okay, let's come back to the start of that question from Ms. Winston. What are the opportunities for U.S.-Ukraine cooperation on oil?
I think we have really potential for oil production in Ukraine, and which is for what we also need investments. And I think it's very important to let's say to bring the companies here for cooperation to increase production. We could do this. We really have one very big refinery, which is Kremenchuk refinery factory. Unfortunately, again, so that is one of the targets of Russians. So they are taking this refinery factory almost once per several months, and use also all kinds of weapon. But I think that it's also a question how we could first of all protect, and that is also important for now, for now. But over the war, after the war, so of course it would be a huge opportunity for cooperation, especially when we are talking about the possibility to use Black Sea.
Let's talk about that a little bit. When I was ambassador in Ukraine, I was there for the first tender for exploration rights in the Black Sea, which an American firm won. This was in the spring of 2006. Obviously, the Russians seized Crimea and are now not allowing, obviously, any Ukrainian exploration in Crimean territorial waters. The Russians were also had taken control of installations for possible oil exploration in other Black Sea Ukrainian waters. Then your drone navy drove them out, just as you drove the Russian Black Sea fleet out of Crimea. So are there prospects now for exploration in your territorial waters not under Russian control in the Black Sea?
I think it's dangerous now. I mean, at that time, of course, we could do this after the war, so we should do this after the war. But now, you know, I mean, they are attacking, for instance, they could reach, in fact, any point around this territory. So, unfortunately.
Well, no, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I understand that, but is there the possibility of a tender for eventual exploration in that area at this point in time, or is that impractical?
No. I mean, of course, it's possible. I mean, but when we are talking about the procedures, but I mean, we understand that in real life, it's really a very challenging situation now.
But that would be a way for a firm to be first in line in the reconstruction period if they were willing to proceed in that direction.
Yeah, that's we have a lot of sites which already explored. So, and we know what inside. So, and that's what could be let's say a ground for cooperation.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from my esteemed colleague Olga Hakova in the Energy Center here at the Atlantic Council. The question is this: Where are the most promising areas for Ukraine to complement EU supply chains, energy and clean tech solutions? And is the European market ready for Ukrainian biofuels and other low carbon gases?
We are working on that, and so we really have developments on that point. So we sign a number of agreements with the EU on that matters, and I can tell you that we even have one case when we already supplied the biogas to Germany. Which is a unique case because we did it first, and that was done during the war. So we are moving in this sphere very deep. We have discussions also concerning, for instance, the hydrogen issue, and we see that that could be really for Ukraine, especially when we are talking about the agriculture, as Ukraine is an agriculture country. So that's very, very interesting, let's say, track of cooperation.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Wojtek. Can you please expand on energy cooperation between Ukraine and Poland?
In fact, we several spheres. First of all, of course, we as a neighboring country, we export and import electricity between us, and when we need the import we got from Poland, or when we can have the profits that we exporting to Poland. We also now reach an agreement to increase the interconnectors on gas supply, and that is also very important for us. And so we could, like in both ways, supply gas to Ukraine or from Ukraine to Poland. And of course, we managed to add one electricity line in 2023 to Poland, which is Rzeszów, Khmelnytskyi, and PP. And so it's at another interconnectors in the electricity grids. And I think that one of the very important points now that is nuclear. So we, of course, we aware of the plans of Poland to construct nuclear units. And here, Ukrainian expertise and Ukrainian specialists, which we have on nuclear, could be very useful. We also discussed this, by the way, with Westinghouse CEO when Patrick was here. That this could be one ground of cooperation between Ukraine and Poland.
Thank you. Here is a question from someone who chose not to put their name in. What is the future energy mix of Ukraine? Then it says there are different projections. What is the view of the Ministry of Energy on the energy mix of Ukraine in the future?
We see the mix as a mix of nuclear and renewables and hydro. That is our plan. We have the energy strategy adopted by 2050, and it also takes into account the situation with the war in the nearest year, and we see that nuclear, renewables, and hydro. And what is also very important that I can tell you already as our, let's say, as a fact from the previous 3 years of constant attack of the energy infrastructure, we won't be able to maintain the system without nuclear. That is the fact of the situation on the ground.
Thank you. All right. Again, a reminder to the audience, if you want to have a question, go to askac.org. I have a question for you. How has reconstruction, how do you look at rebuilding of energy infrastructure in the context of Ukraine's reconstruction?
I think it's very important, not to reconstruct as it was before. For instance, it's a situation when everything was destroyed. So we have cities, we have villages which are completely destroyed, and also we do not have any electricity lines. Everything is destroyed, like substation, everything is destroyed. And of course, I see two very important points. First of all, of course, very important to aware that even after the war, the military risks for us is forever. So Russia doesn't disappear. In some way, this country would be near Ukrainian borders, and we would have this military risk. Having this experience of military attacks to the energy infrastructure, of course, we need to take into account how to rebuild the energy more safe with this let's say possible military risk. And the second point is that, of course, we need to bring all innovations which exist in the world, all innovations in the energy to rebuild it really on the highest demands, on the highest level of innovations and technology in the energy sector.
Thank you. I remember very well the weeks after the Russian big invasion began and how you worked brilliantly, the Ukraine worked brilliantly with the EU to establish your connection with the electricity grid. And you actually referred to that in your set remarks. How does energy factor? What is your role in the negotiations with the EU on Ukrainian membership?
In fact, we become. I always said that we become a member in 16th of March 2022. I mean, in the energy, because we were connected.
Yes.
And
Yes.
of course, it was some emergency procedure. Then we do some additional work for that. But from our side, the risks at that time was that we were disconnected 3 hours before the full-scale invasion started. And we was in an island, like in isolation mode. And if something would happen in the system, we do not have possibility to restart or to bring it back. So this really, of course, it was a lot of political, frankly speaking, a lot of political pressure to connect us. And I'm very grateful to United States, by the way, because it was the key player on that. I mean, to discuss with Europeans that you need to connect Ukraine because of this risk of total blackout of the country. And I think that it's very important that we did it. So now we are fully legally connected to the European grids. And of course, it's really gives possibility for our business to export electricity. It gives possibility for us. And certification, for instance, even the certification due to the EU legislation of gas storages in Ukraine also allowed the EU traders, for instance, not this winter, but the previous winter, store up to 3 BCM of non-residential gas in our storages for security of supply in Europe.
Just to go one more time at this, are there significant changes that you need to introduce in Ukraine in the energy sector as part of joining the EU?
The more important points, a lot of things are done really, and we have very good estimations from Europeans on the progress in the energy sector. But we need to do some also important laws, for instance, like the integration of markets, electricity markets. That is important law. It's very difficult. It's huge. It's merged 9 directives and regulations from EU in one law, but we are doing now. So we will do this year for sure, and so it will, I must say, finalize this more difficult legislation which should be adopted in the sphere of energy.
All right. What would you like to see the U.S. or the EU do to enhance both energy security in Ukraine, but also energy development?
I think that it's very important to, just to take the position that never again. That is a popular Russian slogan, never again, but it was about the World War II. But I think it's very important to take position that we can't be back to the Russians' presence in the energy sector of Europe. And having this in mind, we have to look on the situation together with the United States, how we could cooperate to completely substitute their presence.
Okay. We have a question from Hirakai Nakanishi. How about a project of revitalizing Carpathian LNG, liquid natural gas, or rare metal exploitation industries?
So it's not in operation now, this project, but of course, so we have this all information. So for this Carpathian story, and it's really could be one of the projects to be implemented. And the question is about who would do this and the investments.
So what you're saying is if you could find investors for it, you'd be all for moving forward.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. We talked about you talked about the role of energy in the reconstruction of Ukraine. Are you going to be participating in the reconstruction conference in Rome in June?
Yeah, I'm planning to come.
You'll be there. We hope to see you there.
With pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Are you? My understanding was that there was substantial contact with our Secretary of the Energy in the Biden administration. Have you established contacts with your counterpart in the Trump administration or the department?
I already sent the letter to Mr. Wright on where I mentioned the possibility for cooperation, and I'm sure that we would discuss this. I don't know, maybe online or maybe some personal meeting.
Okay. Well, I think we've taken a good deal of your time. I'd like to thank you for a honest and thorough conversation. I look forward to seeing you in Rome, and I thank all of our listeners for listening in. And we'll be doing another energy-related event regarding what's going on in the Baltic Sea later this month. Thank you all for tuning in. Mr. Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you
And we
very
look
much.
forward to
Thank you to
hosting you
everyone.
again.
Thank you.